Number of years ago, when Victory Asia was just kind of beginning to flourish, Bible colleges were springing up and church planting was happening, new nations were being opened up, very exciting times. And I was back in Canada and got called into a meeting. And the meeting was something like this: boardroom table and some leaders at the head of the boardroom table, and flanked by some, what would you call, support, backup. Quite an unfriendly looking situation. And I'm called in to this position. It's kind of lonely down there. And then the agenda gets laid on the table, and this is the points that we're going through. Honestly, I have no recollection what that meeting was about, because it just blew me away. But anyway, this agenda was read, and I said, can I share something? No, you listen, we're talking. Apparently it was some kind of conflict resolution to fix something that I was doing that leadership didn't like. I walked out of that boardroom. My wife is waiting out there. She said, your face was just gray, like the blood had drained out of your face. The thing that you realize is that whatever happened in that meeting did not resolve anything, because there was no consideration, there was no response, there was just, we're reading you the riot act, this is the way it is, and this is the way you're going to fall in line. And so you leave there and then you make some decisions. And basically my decision was, well, I can't stay here. This is so disenfranchising, so discouraging, so disappointing. So I move away from that whole way of doing things. And I surround myself with leaders who are encouraging and uplifting and going to be, yes, we can do this and we can do this together. And there you have Victory Asia. You remember the story of Saul and the honey when he put a curse on his army? 1 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 24. So, of course, the backstory is Jonathan and his armor bearer crawl up the side of the hill. They take out 20 Philistines in this half-acre plot. Saul is over under a pomegranate tree, sitting there with 600 men, and a priest, and the Ark of the Covenant is there, and all that kind of stuff. And then they notice that the armies of the Philistines begin to flee. The ground begins to shake. And the interesting thing is, right then, Saul thinks that he's the one that's causing the battle to be victorious. You can see it in his wording, the way he talks to the priest. And then they take a roll call to find out who's missing. It turns out Jonathan and his armor bearer. Okay, so that's what's happening. Israel gets mobilized really by Jonathan's act of faith, and they begin to chase after the Philistines. The battle goes on all that day, and then the next day they're in another place, still chasing Philistines. And Saul, well, my Bible calls it a rash oath. It says, and the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had placed the people under oath, saying, cursed is the man who eats any food until evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies. Saul is pretty important here. Before I have taken vengeance on my enemies, nobody's going to eat. We'll show those guys. Now the people of the land came to a forest. It says all the people of the land. And there was honey on the ground. Where did the honey come from? God put it there. And when the people had come into the woods, there was honey dripping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. Why did God put the honey there? Because these guys had been running for 2 days after Philistines, at least 2 days, and they needed some food. They needed some refreshment. They needed a kick of energy. Nothing gives you a kick of energy like a cup full of honey. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with that oath. Therefore, he stretched out the end of his rod that was in his hand, and he dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth. And what happened? Its countenance brightened. It says his eyes lit up. The blood came back into his face. He was ready to go again. And that's what that honey was about. And Saul kept the people from that because he wanted to be the leader. And you are going to do this my way, or it's not going to be done at all. And praise God for his mercy, that even in that, Israel was still able to win a victory. The credit doesn't go to Saul. The credit goes to Jonathan and his armor bearer. And so then Saul says, according to the oath, he's going to kill Jonathan. And of course, the people rise up and say, no, you're not going to kill him. He's the one that brought deliverance to Israel. And he actually mobilized a whole bunch of other guys that were disenfranchised and discouraged and all that kind of stuff. See, great action is what inspires us. But great fellowship is what builds us up, is what moves us, is what equips us. And one of our Victor tenets is that we work together through relationship, not through control. Now, I have never, ever asked any of you, Victor Asia leaders, to come into my boardroom and read you the riot act and say it's going to be like this. You have never seen me confront conflict like that. In fact, when we deal with conflict, we probably don't even realize it's conflict because we deal with it in such a way that it's based on fellowship. See, the thing is, the people that you lead, okay, the people downstream from your leadership are more important than the mandate. Okay, you are more important to me than the mission to reach, teach, and mobilize. Well, because you're all we have. You're it. I'm it. We're the ones that are gonna do this. Years ago, when we just moved from Bangkok out to Saoirse, the El Shaddai Children's Home, there was a girl working with us who wanted to stay in Bangkok and start her own children's home. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. Go ahead and do that. And so she did that, and she had 2 or 3 people working with her. And she talked to me one day and said, they're not doing what I need them to do. And so I started asking her some questions. I said, okay, so how do you lead them? She says, well, I tell them what they need to do. And I said, so do you have a time where you pray together and study together, learn something new, and then talk about the vision and the purpose? No, we don't need to do that because we actually live together in the same house. And I said, you know what? If you don't intentionally have a time, listen to me, leaders. If you ask me, Pastor Al, what is the biggest secret? What is the most important secret to leading your team? I would say an intentional, really, really good meeting. Don't have bad meetings, but a really good meeting. Think of it in this way. Do you love Summit? You love coming to Summit? I absolutely love Summit. And whenever we have a meeting, I think of it as a mini summit. What are some of the elements? Well, fellowship is huge. Good food, that's important. Prophetic ministry, prayer together, seeking God together, learning something new from the Word, listening to each other. And this is really the key. The reason that, being called into a board meeting doesn't work is because nobody's listening to me. They're just telling me. We are just not mobilized and empowered by being given orders. Recently, Swang and I got to spend some real good time together in Pakistan with Pastor Peter and Lubna, staying in Pastor Peter's house and staying in the same bedroom. There's a lot of things that I need to talk about with Pastor Swang or with any of the leaders. We've got to spend time together. And this was a very precious time for me, and I believe for him as well, where we got to just chill. When we weren't having meetings, we could just talk about things. And there's some things bothering me about the church in Saoirse, and there's some things bothering Swang about our leadership and where we're going and that kind of stuff. And spending time together, I noticed that he was able to share his heart and a bunch of things with me that just caused me to change my mind about some of the things that I was looking at from afar. And the same thing from this side, Swang able to listen to me and change his mind. I could see him changing his mind about a few things, as we're talking. And that to me is the way that we move ahead. There was no conflict to resolve in that. Okay? Conflict resolution doesn't work unless you're living under law. So in your team, you need to be very clear about the vision. You need to be very clear about the culture. Culture is really the tracks that my brain and my thinking run on. And that's the tracks that your brain and your thinking and all the people in your team, that's the tracks that we run on. And so it's very important to keep those clear of debris, right? Keep those straight and narrow. And also the fellowship and all those kind of things. Like I say, just think of it in terms of a mini summit. And I've led the ministry for years like that. And one of the challenges for me is to find a time to meet because everybody's busy. That's one of the challenges. The other challenge is meetings are boring. Well, that's easy to fix. You just work hard investing in making you've never been to a boring summit, have you? Summit is not hit and miss. It's a winner every time. And I believe the conferences and leadership conferences and the things that you do, they're not hit and miss. They're a win every time. Your Sunday services, they're a win every time. And if there's not, you've got to invest more in them. More time, more thought, more prayer. Because God wants us to win every time, and those things are very important because we're using or calling people to spend their valuable time at that meeting, okay? So when you come to Summit, man, we want you to get your value worth. Whatever you invested in time and money, we want you to go home with 100 times more than what you invested. And so think about staff meetings like that, team meetings like that. How are you going to build a meeting where it's about fellowship, based on fellowship, based on the culture that we have, that we love each other, that we're for each other, that we're sharing together, that I'm not the boss and you're the servants, that we have come with Jesus down onto a level place and we are ministering together on a level place. There's no hierarchy, there's no flow charts, there's just us working together in fellowship and in unity of vision. And I promise you, I guarantee that if you will invest in having good meetings, forget the conflict. Don't even bother having a one-on-one conflict conflict resolution meeting. It just doesn't work, or leaders at one end of the boardroom table and some, backup flanking them and then put the guy at the other end of the table and straighten him out. It's not going to work. Like I say, I have no recollection to this day of what that meeting was about, honestly. And I've been called to a few of them since that. Sometimes one-on-one, where the paper is put on the table. This is what you're doing. This is the list. We go through the list, and I'm like, man, I don't remember that list. I don't even remember anything. Do you want me to tell my side? No, you just listen. Okay, well, I'm out of here. You think what David and Jonathan and these guys went through with King Saul. And we talk about how David honored Saul. He actually didn't. He honored the position. He honored God in what God had called Saul to do. He honored the call. In fact, David had the same call in his life. Why wouldn't he honor it? But if you look at David's prayer life, it was God take him out. God take him out. And when Saul died, David called the whole country together to mourn Saul. Why? Not because he was a good guy. He was a total idiot. But because he was the king of Israel. And honoring the king of Israel, the king that God put in place, would be honoring to God. And so that's what that was all about. And so you don't honor people's stupidity. Don't honor their obstinance, their orneriness. Don't honor their bossiness. You just honor the position that God has put them in, and you keep following. And that's what we do. Getting along with everybody. It's just great. All right, we have some tremendous, tremendous resources as leaders, guys, that we can draw on. You've got to, leaders are learners. You've got to be learning something new all the time that you can share with your team. Learning all the time. Listen, learning all the time, okay? Find the best way that works for you. For me, podcasts are wonderful. I'm not really good at reading books. It takes me forever and I get stuck and I got to go back and just not a good reader, but I can listen to the same guy on a podcast and just glean so much. And spending time with leaders as well in conferences. We just came out of the Dominion Conference, powerful time with some powerful leaders. We're just heading down to Texas this week to spend some time with some powerful leaders. And those things, I'm just there, just hungry to receive and to hear what God's going to say that's going to help us get to the next place that we need to be. So bless you guys. Keep strong in the faith, keep strong in the vision, keep strong in the culture, keep strong in the fellowship, and stay strong in your commitment to lead through relationship, through powerful, effective, high-end meetings. You know what? I believe that you can put a meeting together that is just a winner, absolute winner in every way.